Hello, everyone. I'm Mystery,
And I am Bolton Mortimer, otherwise known as the Authenticator, and we are the Duality of Man.
and today we're here to talk to you about false accusations against men. We're going to talk about some famous cases and just really talk about the way society, can take accusations, not have any proof that they're actually true, and then just run with them. There's an old saying that a lie can get halfway across the world before the truth has a chance to put its boots on, and in 2021 that is absolutely true.
Yeah, because the truth actually has to drag logic and or empirical reality along with it, and a lie only has to drag enfeebled human minds with it. It's a lot less luggage in this metaphor.
All right, now I have here some cases. They're actually from Kaplan and Tamburino. They're a law firm in Pennsylvania, and they handle these types of cases. And they have a number of cases here on their website to just give as examples of some of the things they've had to handle. Now, let me tell you about the case of a man called Thomas Kennedy. I don't know if this is actually his real name, but Thomas Kennedy was accused of rape by his daughter on several occasions. Based on the sensitivity of the claims and the seemingly authentic evidence, Thomas was sentenced to 15 years in prison. However, after 9 long years, Thomas's daughter confessed that the physical pieces of evidence of that put Thomas away were caused by an elementary school boy that she was having relations with. As the boy was an adult at the point of her confession, he substantiated the claim, releasing Thomas from prison. While Thomas is a free man today, he can never get back those 9 years, and in the minds of some, he will always be a rapist despite his innocence.
Well, there's that, and there's also the fact of why is this woman not in prison?
It's
Because
possible that um, because maybe statute of limitations had passed.
I mean, maybe, but this is the first of the many elephants in the room with this topic. Unless you make some kind of penalty for false accusation, you will do nothing but either turn a blind eye to them or very often probably encourage them to happen. This is one of those the law should apply equally um to everyone, and since the freaking Code of Hammurabi and probably before in some informal sense before it was written down, there's been the principle do not bear false witness, and this kind of stuff is exactly why. Like, imagine if we lived in a third world country or an Islamic country where the penalty for such things would be death. Um, that is far less reversible than the incarceration that we do here in the Western world. But even so, like the article said, that 9 years is not going anywhere. It cannot be returned to him. There's no like a life extension power or something that the court has that would make things much easier and more fair probably. But until we master genetic engineering like something out of the movie In Time, you can't just give somebody 9 years back. So why is there no penalty for false accusations?
All right, now I want to first of all, you're absolutely right. There should be a penalty for false accusations because it's a perversion of justice for one thing, and second of all, it destroys an innocent person's life, tarnishes their good name, and the guy had to languish in prison for 9 years. Who knows what he experienced while he was in there?
Yeah. And third of all, it again incentivizes or at least um, renders neutral the action of inflicting the force of the court and the force of the prison system onto someone for having done nothing at all. And there's a reason why we legitimate the um, authority, quote unquote, of the state to engage in prison, but we don't. We actually consider a private citizen engaging in the kinds of behavior that the prison system does to be crimes. Like if someone else forcibly incarcerates you that's not a police officer or part of the legal system, we consider that grievous kidnapping and usually grievous bodily harm to boot. So it's very necessary within the context of the legal system that we make sure we have the right man. It's the exact reason why I'm not in favor of the death penalty, because death, at least for the moment, is not a very reversible state of affairs. So if you get it wrong, there's there's harm there, and not to mention, but studies have shown for people that have survived like lethal injection and stuff, it's not the painless, oh, you just go to sleep and then you die, um, that a lot of people in favor of the death penalty have said it has been over the years. So ridiculous pain followed by permanent death is a bit unreversible, in my opinion, but whatever.
Now, there's something I want to talk about, and that is the degeneration of society. That's something that we've talked a little bit about in private, but you got to think about the situation of this case. This is a daughter who, after engaging in consensual acts with another teenager, goes on to accuse her father of rape. This could only happen, in my opinion, due to the societal breakdown of the importance of the family unit. And while I don't know what kind of father he necessarily was, he could have been a bad guy. But even if he was, like, to accuse him of something he didn't do and something so grievous, it just shows a lack of
It's
familial.
it's it's also worth noting, where on earth did she get the idea to do such a thing? Um, which is why I do kind of give a little bit of an asterisk, because if things were leave it to Beaverish in the home life department here, I doubt she would be such a person that would have that idea to begin with. But even so, we should address the fact that this woman is at least probably a nascent um, narcissist or sociopath. If a 15-year-old girl gets it in her head that she would rather accuse her own father of pedophilic rape um, and incest than take the lumps for seeing that boy she likes, without her father's knowing, um, then that is quite an extreme perversion of what we call human decency. Not to not to mention the fact that I could totally see a situation where the reason she accused him might have been because he took issue with her seeing this guy, and she pulled a, you know, love-struck teenage move and went, "Oh yeah, Dad, you're gonna take issue with me seeing this guy? Well, I'm gonna accuse you of things, and then I won't have to deal with your bullshit anymore." Which, holy fucking hell, that escalated quickly. If that is indeed I'm speculating, but that seems to be the most reasonable, in my head, course of events that would lead to something like this. Unless she was the freaking reincarnation of Elizabeth Bathory or something, and was
Uh,
just that screwed up and just wanted to cause him pain for no reason, which I doubt.
Now let's talk about hashtag Me Too and
Oh dear lord. The the
this.
modern the femme scare is what I've taken to calling it, because it reminds me a lot of the Red Scare.
It's basically like a modern day women's inquisition.
Which it is worth noting that in I'm not sure about witch trials in general, but in the Salem witch trials at least, the majority of the accusers were a group of teenage girls. So it's this is not one of those modern development things. Women have always had the nuclear social power of accusation, because women are the stewards of social cohesion, the homestead, and the moral pecking order. That is in both traditionalistic societies and in modern ones the niche that women find themselves in, the ability to be stewards of the moral pecking order, which means if if women decide X variety of human um is not morally allowed vis-a-vis lynchings or the like, then that particular kind of person gets taken away in stocks or what have you, depending on the reaction,
Okay.
or hung in the case of lynchings, of course. You know what I'm saying.
Okay. So we all know how Me Too started. It started with Harvey Weinstein being called out for his, you know, uh, sexual abuses in the film industry.
Which,
While
which, which,
while
which,
what he
just to
did
be
was,
clear, we're not defending Harvey Weinstein or anyone that actually did what they are accused of, by the way.
yeah, what he did was absolutely despicable. However, it should be worth noting that while what he did is despicable, all the people that accused him agreed to his demands.
Which suggests to me that they have at least an opportunistic streak in them, and that's totally fine. I have no problem with having an opportunistic streak, but you can either be a pragmatic opportunist or you can play the moral high ground. These two things are really quite mutually exclusive, and they
Yeah, I mean,
necessarily need to be because otherwise, hysteria and moralism vis-a-vis the rest of Me Too.
yeah, I mean, they all have the opportunity to walk away. They even could have walked away and reported him, but they chose a career in acting and being rich and famous over their own dignity and the possible future dignity of the woman that would come after them.
Yeah, it is what we call a fundamentally Faustian bargain. But you signed it, so you don't get to sell your soul and then contest. Wait, I didn't realize I was selling my soul when I sold it. Well, good for you, Sparky. You still signed the thing. So yeah.
But this has really snowballed the whole Me Too thing, and now people are being accused for the most ridiculous things. I remember, do you know Chris Hardwick?
Oh yes, he of Nerdist and Talking Dead fame, the sort of normie liaison to the culture of geekdom, as it were. I used to really like the guy actually. I remember watching a bunch of his specials on BBC America because he would always get called in whenever they had one of those sort of geek culture outreach to the normie type shows. And he's
I
a
watched
really
those
big
too.
fan from what I
I like
remember of
those as
Doctor
well.
Who. Hmm.
But he was accused by his ex girlfriend, a woman named Chloe Dykstra, of intentionally sabotaging her career. I believe she accused him of saying that he did not want to work with her going forward in any future projects, which ended up hurting her career prospects. And
Okay.
in my opinion, this just seems to me like a guy who went through a what I assume would be a difficult breakup and saying, I don't want to constantly be around my ex girlfriend.
Yeah, they had a falling out and they went their separate ways, and this was Chris Hardwick's rather polite attempt to go his separate ways from her without making a big stink. But oh yay and behold, in the moral magnification of Me Too, he's, pilloried in the court of public opinion, as you do.
And there was ridiculous blowback to this. I believe that he actually had his name removed from the list of founders for the Nerdist podcast, which he helped found.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was at least partially his baby, so I call bullshit.
Yeah,
It's a
it
little
just
bit it's a little bit like recently, I believe it was Warren Ellis. Well, I might be getting Warren Ellis and Garth Ennis confused because I do that a lot. But whichever one of them is the founder and creator of the Castlevania anime, was removed from it because apparently um, there was some awkwardness between him and a female coworker at a convention. And from what I've read of the incident report, um, it suggests that they were in a social situation and he simply misread some social cues, which is something else to be talked about in regards to false accusations, and in particular Me Too. When you say that social faux pas and getting occasionally too touchy is equivalent to sexual assault, you are equating something that is very, very definitely not okay with somebody just was getting intimate and misread some social cues, which are two vastly different things.
Yep. This reminds me, let's put up another hashtag Me Too story. Uh,
Okay.
okay, a woman named Amber Heard accused her ex-husband
I
named Johnny Depp.
I was about to say, whilst we're here yet again, let us play that classic song, "Have Mercy on Johnny Depp" and "Fuck Amber Heard." Except don't
Yeah.
fuck her because you will probably end up on the hook for child support.
Now, for those who didn't watch our episode regarding the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, first off, go back and watch it, and second off, to give a quick summation, uh, Amber Heard accused Johnny Depp of physical abuse during the process of their divorce.
Despite having a
Accused,
non-defamation clause to the contrary in the divorce contract.
yeah, and also, I believe she accused him of striking her repeatedly, throwing her into a table, dragging her across glass, and the police actually investigated this,
And
and
found no evidence of such.
yeah, and the judge in the case allowed Johnny Depp to keep all of his property, which almost never happens.
And what's more, the evidence we do actually have, which includes an audio recording that both parties were aware of at the time, um, in implies that she was the primary abuser and that Johnny Depp, for all of his introversion, just wanted to get away from her. And what's more, we have her on tape admitting that one of the reasons she abuses him, basically, is that he doesn't play the alpha Chad role of the forceful partner.
And like I said, these accusations were dismissed during the divorce proceedings. However, after hashtag Me Too came rolling around, she brought up these same accusations again. Like she couldn't get him in an actual court, so she could try and defame him in the court of public opinion.
Yeah, and also worth noting, the women who previously had dated Johnny Depp, one of whom including the person that he cheated on, or he cheated with Amber Heard on, came to his defense and said that the Johnny Depp being portrayed by Amber Heard's accusations had no resemblance to the Johnny Depp that either of them knew.
Yeah. And, if any woman was going to have a grudge against Johnny Depp, it would have to be that the woman that he left
Cheated on
with
with this
Amber Heard.
specific woman, yes.
And for her to come to his defense, he would have to be an absolute stand up guy. So that gives more credence to the fact that these accusations are almost
Yeah,
certainly.
and it's also worth noting that even with all of this, Johnny Depp has never once aggressively come after Amber Heard or even accused her of lying. Um, all he's done is attack the media types reporting on it, and basically defaming him as a wife beater.
Not only that, but Amber Heard was accused of beating another one of her partners, but that partner decided to drop the charges.
Mm-hmm. So we have one party who is basically on the record being one of the most introverted people in existence in Hollywood, and we have one party who has a history of abuse who straight out admitted on tape that she gets fits of anger, and that her fits of anger sometimes uh, result in hitting, and that she fully intended to, or at least saw it as likely that she would end up hitting him again, and made excuses for her violence, just like every classical abuser ever does. And meanwhile, the only time on the tape that we actually see Amber Heard be physically damaged in any way whatsoever is when Johnny Depp goes into his own bathroom, closes the door to get away from her and cool off. She tries to break down the door, injures one of her toes whilst trying to break down the door, and Johnny, in all of his hipster glory, actually asked her if she was okay as she injured herself while trying to break down the door that he closed to get away from her. So, ladies and gentlemen of the internet jury, either Johnny Depp is some kind of master Machiavellian manipulator par excellence and is one of the best actors we've ever seen, and Amber Heard isn't, even though she was fully aware she was being recorded at the time, or the woman with a history of violent outbursts by her own admission um, is lying for the sake of defaming the boyfriend or husband that she didn't get what she wanted from.
Yes. It really does seem like hashtag #MeToo is basically just a cudgel with which women can use to beat their enemies.
Yeah,
And they never actually go after the people who are actually abusive because those people tend to be well connected and very
yeah,
useful. For example,
with the exception of the initial incident of Harvey Weinstein. Once again, just pointing
yeah,
that out there.
but notice how none of these people who claim to have supported Me Too didn't go after Epstein until after he was arrested.
Yeah, all of a sudden, when it became obvious that he was a moral outcast, there was dogpiling and bandwagoning, which is a common thing among these sorts of moral panics, by the way. And this, by the way, has always been a power that women uniquely have. Men are the stewards of overt power and of external civilization on external infrastructure or professional settings, but women are the stewards of covert power, social manipulation, and social cohesion, as well as the moral pecking order and the homestead. So this entirely fits within what we know about how sexual dimorphism affects evolutionary psychology and the social roles that men and women take up.
Yeah, none of them were going after Epstein, the man who didn't kill himself, the guy who was running a sex island, but
And basically being the nerdy go-between of all the chads in Hollywood and in politics and everywhere else with any significant degree of power.
were morally outraged at Harvey Weinstein engaging in things that while there was a power differential between them, I mean, socially,
Yeah,
they still chose to engage in in that contract with him.
yeah, and also everyone apparently knew what Weinstein was doing, and only after somebody was the first in the firing line did anyone feel brave enough to actually do it. I.e., when it became obvious that there was no defense of him, then it was open season. But no one in the presumably like 40 years before this did a darn thing.
And you know, women are actually starting to complain now about the after effects of Me Too because you know now men are being a lot more cautious in the way that they engage with women in the workplace. I remember former Vice President Mike Pence said that he wouldn't be alone with a woman at dinner, and he would only go to dinner with a woman if his wife was around.
Although in in the defense of Me Too, and I hate using those words, they feel awful in my mouth, but I must use them anyway. Mike Pence, it seems, was that kind of person even before this whole rigmarole happened. Because Mike Pence is traditionalist almost to the point of parody. Um,
True, but there's also reports that women are not getting mentor opportunities because a lot of the people in the business world that are very high up and successful are men.
do not expect them to use that power appropriately and or expect to be at some point in the possible line of fire and therefore want to avoid it.
I mean, can you blame them? Like, I wouldn't want to be accused of that.
No, it's kind of like how we know that when we know during the Salem witch trials, people's tendency to make eye contact with each other actually went down um, when they like passed each other on the street and stuff because nobody wanted to do anything that could feasibly be warped or recontextualized into, oh, X person was doing something socially unacceptable. That must mean they're a witch. Um, and much in the same way, I would imagine, if any level of intimacy with a woman can get you pilloried in effigy, in at least the socio-cultural sense, then obviously you don't find yourself in intimate situations with women. It's the, you know, if you know you're going into a lion's den, you're more cautious than if you just think you're going to, go into a room full of kittens. And as it turns out, there are a great degree among the women of the world who act all vulnerable and kittenish, but when push comes to shove, especially in the moral dimension, they will take your hide and wear it for all intents and purposes.
Now let's talk about the Rolling Stones article. Now, the Rolling Stones article came out in, I believe, 2014. It was titled "A Rape on Campus" by a
Yeah, I
woman
was gonna
named,
say this is a fairly old story, but it's
relevant
similar
to the
in
topic,
yeah.
but it was written by Sabrina Rubin Erdele. And basically, it says that a female student on a campus at the University of Virginia was gang raped by a fraternity, the Phi Kappa Psi fraternity, and it was accused that, let me see, um, an official at the university, Nicole Aramo, was accused of trying to persuade the female student not to report it and tried to cover it up. This all was reported to be false, and the Rolling Stones basically took this accusation, did basically no research, and just ran with it, and it ended up destroying a lot of lives because of it.
Well, I think the cut and thrust of this is all of this fits very neatly into our instinctual and evolutionary plugs because we like to see women as both vulnerable and morally pure. That's one of the reasons why women were always the stewards of the social pecking order because if you want to have a fair society, you put the principle of justice in the hands of the people you find to be the most vulnerable and the most morally pure. Problem being, despite our instinctual tendency to want to believe women are vulnerable and morally pure in all circumstances, it only takes one Machiavellian manipulator of a woman to whip all the rest of them into a frenzy and or convince all the rest of them that a very morally questionable thing is no longer morally questionable, and then we get moral panics and hysteria. Um, but because we are a instinctually gynocentric species, i.e., we prioritize the whims, thoughts, and desires of women as well as their protection. Um, we like to believe that on balance, in any given situation, the woman is either in need of protection or has been the victim of something, and therefore, no amount of empirical contradiction of that will often shake us out of that um, instinctive preset.
I mean, women can absolutely be devious and manipulative, and this isn't like some new revelation. This has been known for a long time. The problem is people
Yeah.
tend to just not think about it. What's
Yeah,
the
I mean there are real historical examples like like Elizabeth Bathory, which is one of my go-to examples, or there are fictional examples like, for example, Lady Macbeth
I was just about
Shakespeare
I was just
in
about to
Shakespeare's
mention Lady
Macbeth.
Macbeth. I mean, Shakespeare didn't write that from nothing.
But Macbeth was brilliant, but I don't think he invented an entire subgenre of like female archetype. Um, and let's be also be honest, there was something historical that he was touching on there, which is because of the nature of male and female power. Um, there are ways in which informal, covert social power is actually more potent and more insidious than overt formal social power. Because, as an example, let's say it's the French Revolution and the peasants are mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore. Let's get out the guillotine and take it to the noblest, yada 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 yada. Well, the king gets his head cut off, and in many situations like this, not in the case of the French Revolution, mind you, but in many situations like this, when the peasants are fed up with their tyrants and they're not going to take it anymore, the king gets his head cut off. The woman or the queen turns on the waterworks enough that she survives long enough to stoop the next guy on the throne, and she still has as much influence over her partner's decisions um, as she ever did. And that's the other thing. I just want to put this in context for all the men out there. Dear modern day men, you know how when when you technically have the power in the household, but your wife says do this thing and you say yes, dear, do you really think that was a modern invention? Are we all just going to pretend like no queen has ever used her husband as a shield or a puppet, or at
Yeah, I
least
mean,
had an
people.
equal say in what happens to her
I mean,
kingdom or what have you?
feminists like to accuse uh, men for being the rulers of the world for centuries and committing all kinds of atrocities. But you got to wonder how many of those atrocities were committed because a woman whispered into his ear.
Well, and there's also the fact of simply the old adage behind every great man is an even greater woman. Well, if that be true, and on the cards I think mostly it is, then that means that at some points in human history, the woman probably influenced some things, don't you know? And let's not even get into the very obvious modern example, which would be how many decisions do you think Bill Clinton actually made while he was president? Given the demonstrable personalities after the fact and before, how much does everyone want to bet that he didn't at least consult with Hillary before he made the majority of his decisions?
I mean,
Given what happened to him every time he deviated from her will at any given moment.
in Bill Clinton's defense, he was very distracted.
Well, that's neither here nor there, but point being, um, it's not just a phenomena that we can document in the case of monarchs and kings. It's in the case of every other power structure we have as a civilization. Not to mention the fact that the other elephant in the room here, many people forget that before women got the right to vote, suffrage in general was not universal. So only certain men had access to the vote either. And what's more, it was socially expected of you, as the man who had that vote in your household, if you had one, that you made that decision on the behalf of your entire family. Which, again, to point out the modern phenomena of the yes dear syndrome, do, does anyone want to bet against me that some of the time, at least, that vote was more the wife and the husband discussed it. He disagreed with her, but she said, "You will vote this way, or you will be sleeping on the couch tonight," or something along those lines. Because I would not bet against that. I would, in fact, think that was a very, very common thing, especially given that the temperance movement gained steam as a social cause long before women actually technically had the right to vote. Thank you. So, you know, if women truly had no social power of the informal, covert kind, then explain to me why it's always the women, and in particular wealthy, affluent women with a lot of time on their hands, that spearhead social causes of any given kind or description.
Right. Now, let's get back to the article because that was a good conversation, but we kind of diverged there a little bit.
We did.
Now, interestingly enough, in regards to the Rolling Stones article, a 10-member federal jury in Charlottesville found that Erdele, the author of the article, was responsible for libel with actual malice, meaning that she knew that she was writing a lie, and she just went with it anyway, and did not care about the people who got hurt because of it.
Because presumably she had some sort of moral worldview she needed to push. Or, in other words, the greater good. And as we all know, the road to evil is paved with what, ladies and gentlemen? Good intentions.
Now, a report from the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism, commissioned by Rolling Stone, found flaws at every level of the magazine's editing process. It described the article as a story of journalistic failure. So it didn't seem like anybody at this article really looked into what was actually going on.
And yet, because it tells people what they evolutionarily and instinctually want to hear, it became an entire movement unto itself.
Now, do you want to talk about a more recent case regarding a now Supreme Court justice?
Ah, well, that's that's yet another check in the list of we let our moral authoritarianism run away with us now, didn't we?
Now, for those of you who are not aware, how could you possibly not be, considering it was leading the news cycle for about
Yeah, it was the hottest thing in the world for about 6 months back in, I want to say, about
I think late 2018.
2017.
I think late 2018 is when it was.
Okay, so yeah, 2018.
So basically, now Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, while he was going through the process of being confirmed for the Supreme Court, was accused of attempted rape by a woman called Dr. Christine Ford. And apparently, this alleged attempted rape occurred back when they were both in high school, which would have been
College.
about 30 or 40 years ago.
Yeah, and suddenly it dawns on you of the question of why on earth didn't she mention this in the 30 years previous to this date? Oh, because he wasn't the cause du jour of that particular microsecond. How interesting.
Like, and understand that women had societal power, like I mentioned, in order to make these kinds of accusations forever. And
I mean, there's a reason why the old, the traditionalist version of the Karen, if you like, was the image of Helen Lovejoy. the woman moralistically clutching her pearls and saying, "Won't somebody please think of the children?" And yet again, The Simpsons didn't make that up. That was a reaction to a thing that was very, very much going on at the time. And had it gone on at least, half a century prior to when The Simpsons came up with that meme.
Okay. So she accused him of an attempted rape decades ago. There is literally no evidence of this because how could there possibly be? And,
If there ever was evidence of this, then it has long since decayed because the half-life of such things is very, very minimal. And it's
and
been
no
30 freaking years.
and no one that she said was at the party had any idea what the hell she was talking about.
Now, granted, the awareness spectrum of your average high school to college age kid is not very high, so it is entirely possible that something might have happened. But if it was truly as traumatizing as Miss Blasey Ford um, suggests, wouldn't it have been um, at least part of the gossip mill? Because for as unaware as high school to college age kids might be, they are very, very keen indeed to gossip like motherfuckers.
I mean, not only that, but apparently during the incident, she described him as stumbling drunk. And as somebody who has had to deal with a lot of stumbling drunks, they're not very coordinated. And you could have very easily gotten away from this guy. I'm assuming she was stun locked like in a video game because
And it's also worth noting, was she drunk as well? Because that might be affecting her recall of this. And if she wasn't as drunk as he was as well at the time, then assuming there was some kind of sexual congress between them, does that not mean she would therefore be responsible for it? Considering that if she was the more sober party and more able to engage in it, and he, by her own definition, was not, then how how valuable is his consent in this matter whatsoever? Not that it really mattered all that much, because of course this was 30 years ago. But
now apparently he did have some evidence to help him out. Apparently, back in high school, he kept journals, and he had the journal from when he was back in high school around that time. And there was no mention in it of any party or anything even resembling the events that she was talking about.
hooray for record keeping for the win. Sometimes the obsessive nerds that write everything down and record everything are doing so for good reason, ladies and gentlemen. That is the lesson I'm taking from this. Efficiency for the win.
Maybe guys just start wearing a body cam around like a cop.
Just just record everything. And then when someone accuses you of bullshit made out of nowhere things, you can go, actually, I have that file in this folder here, and boom.
Okay, so unfortunately, it didn't end there. Her accusation basically opened up the floodgates for a slew of other accusations. She was accused of uh, being in charge of a gang rape ring in college, and another silly accusation that I can't quite remember. But anyway, there was not a single shred of evidence for any of these accusations, and the media and social media just kept running with this as if it had any actual credence.
Because when you tell people what they want to hear intuitively, instinctually, or evolutionarily, it is much easier to prove something that everyone assumes to be common sense than it is to prove something that is counter to people's sort of innate programming, as it were. And I don't want to sound like I'm foregoing free will here, but we have, I guess you could call them I guess you could call them instinctive sort of presets. We have, preset um, data heuristics as a species, and when the information you want someone to believe complies with those heuristics, it becomes much easier to convince them than it does if you have, say, an example of a man being raped by a woman, because intuitively we don't really allow for that in our evolutionary heuristics.
Uh, I'm pretty sure this accusation was politically motivated. Dr. Ford is a registered Democrat who made small contributions to political organizations. In 2017, she participated in a local women's march protesting then President Trump and attended a March for Science in San Francisco to protest the Trump administration's cuts to research.
Which I know this has nothing to do with anything, but there's a meme savvy part of me that is reminded of the stupid sexy Trump supporters meme. Because of course, Democrat or no Democrat, uber feminist or no uber feminist, she certainly seemed to want quite a lot of D back in the day.
I mean,
Um,
and also, I mean, we shouldn't rule out the chance that it was politically motivated because people have done far worse things for far less.
this is true. I mean, assuming that she does genuinely consider Republicans to be the enemy, um, seeing someone you knew personally who was also a Republican ascending to one of the highest offices in the land, that being a judge on the Supreme Court, probably would motivate you on a moral or political level, depending on how closely tied your moral suppositions were with your political suppositions, which, let's be honest, especially in today's day and age, those two are nigh indistinguishable. It's one of the things that makes today so fraught with danger, because people can't tell the difference between their moral beliefs and their political beliefs at any given moment of any given time.
Now, let's go back to another case from, I believe, 2015. Do you remember a woman called Mattress Girl?
Ah, yes, the Mattress Girl saga.
Now, just going to look up the details of this case, but basically, a woman at, I believe, Columbia University by the name of Solkowitz, and it was in, I believe it was in 2014. But basically, she accused another
Emma
student of
Sokowitz, yes.
sexual assault, and as a protest to sexual assault on campus, she carried around the mattress that she was reportedly assaulted on all day, every day, everywhere she went.
Which
She
I'm sure
graduated
didn't muddy
during this
the
time.
evidence or anything, Ms. Sokowitz.
Yeah.
The the appropriate course of action probably would have been to have swabbed that thing down for DNA evidence, but what the fuck do I know? I'm just talking about actually getting justice and not morally pantomiming for several semesters.
Yeah, and it was really weird because you think that one, such an event would be incredibly traumatizing and she would want to distance herself from it as much as possible and not literally carry around a reminder of it every single day.
You would think, presumably, yes, or that she would report this to proper authorities instead of, again, the moral, like, assuming that she wasn't like, because there are two general pathways for someone who's been traumatized. There's the traumatized to the point of shutting up variety of person, but there is also the lionized victim who decides, this far no further, the line must be drawn here. No one else will ever have to suffer this way. I'm going to champion this as a cause, because those people do exist. You only need look at, for example, Rosa Parks or the like for confirmation of something like that. But Even so, their demonstrations in the second case tend to be more practical and less like moral theater, which I don't know how you could get more melodramatic, pantomime or theatrical than um, carrying around the mattress like it was a prop in a piece of performance art for several semesters, which again also kind of muddy the possibility of ever getting any evidence off the thing, which would be my main concern if I were adjudicating this, would be you gave me a piece of evidence that was then contaminated for several months because you didn't think of using it for any practical purposes and instead went right to the moral pantomime.
Hold
Get the
on
fuck out
again.
of my courtroom at that point.
Apparently, she did file charges with the university and the New York police. Both investigated and both declined to take action against the accused.
Uh-huh. So once again, we have the court of public opinion and the court of actual proper um, procedure at odds with one another, but the court of actual procedure can go fuck itself because we have everything we need and to engage our lower primate brains and go ook 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 protect the women.
Now, apparently, we have Facebook messages that were exchanged between the two within 48 hours of the alleged incident. He invites her to a small shindig in his room and asked her to bring cool freshmen. She replied, "Well, yes, I hate this. I hate speaking like this so much. Well, yes, I'll be over with the female soon. Also, I feel like we need to have some real time where we can talk about life and things because we still haven't really had a Paul Emma chill sesh since summer." 10 days later, she texted him, "Whatever, I want to see you. Respond. I'll get the message on my phone." After she sent her effusive message on her birthday, she responded, "I love you, Paul. Where are you?"
Okay, so like
That
I
was
can
painful to read.
understand angrily messaging the guy the day after and being like, "What the fuck did you do?" Yada yada yada. Because I can imagine being pissed if this were an actual situation. But that message, unless I really blacked out just now, does not sound at all angry. And in fact, it sounds more like jovial and personal and intimate and familial than I actually have with 90% of my actual family members. So one has to ask the question, if this thing was so traumatizing, so irreparably altering to her personality such that she couldn't focus on her schoolwork for several semesters, which was another thing she had said, um, all of this, if it were so, just biblically horrifying, like something out of Bosch painting, you would assume she would either be angry or silent.
I
And
mean,
those two things were nowhere to be found in those messages. That, in
my
fact, strikes me as a very, very close friend that you somewhat want to be something more with at some point. Just
yeah,
saying.
my reading on this was they were basically friends with benefits. She wanted more, he didn't, and when he turned her down, that's when the whole
If
mattress.
I can't have you, nobody can. I'll make it seem like you're a rapist under her. Yeah. The wrath of the proverbial woman scorned comes to mind.
Yeah, I mean, when women want revenge, they go for the jugular. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's the it's not enough for you to suffer. You have to suffer in in a public hearing and then pelted with fruit and tied into a stockade or something along those lines. It's
Yeah.
how we got to the puritanical place that resulted in all those inquisitions and witch trials back in the day.
There was also another case that took place on a college campus. I can't remember the names of the people involved, so I can't really look it up. But from what I recall, it was a girl who accused a guy that she slept with of rape, but it turned out to be false because she basically did it so that another guy that she actually liked would feel sympathy for her and maybe start going out with her.
Um, was that the Brock Turner case? Because I know one of these has got to be the Brock Turner case.
I'm not sure. Like I said, this was
I don't think that's the Brock Turner case, but that's the only name that's springing to my mind right at this
yeah.
exact moment.
I don't think it's a Brock Turner case either. But yeah, just fellas, be exceedingly careful about when you get involved with.
And
Make sure.
it seems like we use this chestnut a lot, but if you have any reasonable suspicion that she's crazy, then the private parts of the both of you should not meet each other at all. Because if you stick it in crazy, the crazy might follow you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, she can be hot. Yeah, you can be really into her, and you might think that it's worth it. You know, maybe just one time, a casual thing. Just it ain't. Trust
I
me,
I, I,
it's
I
not.
hate to I hate to be this nerdy, but this is one of the reasons why I recommend everybody read the Dresden Files, regardless of their taste, because one thing Jim Butcher is very good at portraying is the power of sexual glamour and how dangerous that shit can be. Because this whole thing is bringing to mind the Maeve scenes from both Summer Night and Cold Days. I know that was a complete non sequitur, but still, anyone who's read the Dresden Files knows what I mean.
Yeah, the Dresden Files was a good series of books, but just honestly, try to minimize your risk the best way you know how, and just make sure that you have a way of proving that you are that you did not engage in any illegal sexual activity. Just
Yeah, buy a tape recorder, buy a video camera, something that you can keep on at all times, so that if you're accused of something, and and what's more, even outside of this serious sort of thing, I'm starting to find that a tape recorder is useful for even just in general when you're arguing with somebody, because people when they're in the middle of being angry with you have a fantastic ability to forget or misconstrue everything you say and forget and misconstrue everything they say. So having a tape recorder or a visual recorder of some kind might be useful even for something like that. Because I can tell you some of the favorite arguments I've ever had have been arguments I've had on streams, because I can literally go back and listen to how everything went down. So if I'm uncertain of, did I fuck up? Did the person I was talking to fuck up? Did we both fuck up? What happened? I actually have the data to go back and look and be like, oh, this is what happened. This is what was said, and this is how it was said, and this was context in which it was said. Yay, I love physical recorded evidence.
yeah, and just remember that if you hear about a case of somebody being accused of this kind of thing, if they
Yeah.
go to Twitter before they go to the police, take it with a grain of
Skepticism.
salt.
Also, it's worth noting, and I think we should get into this part of the discussion. One of the most horrifying and bass backwards parts of this whole moral panic rigmarole is accusations being taken as equivalent to confirmations, which completely and utterly inverts the burden of proof all the way back to the Hammurabi Code. That's why the "thou shalt bear no false witness" thing is in the Hammurabi Code, and every subsequent um, form of law we are aware of as a civilization.
I mean, this really started with the believe victims hashtag.
Listen
But
and believe.
you know, just because you necessarily have empathy for somebody who says that they were sexually assaulted doesn't mean that the entire legal process should be thrown out the window,
Yeah,
and
and
there's a form of basically a digital lynching.
the legal process requires people being on equal footing. But if you give accusations legitimacy before they've been confirmed or before evidence has been supplied for them, that is you giving them that is you giving the accuser more moral authority and more authority in general than the accused, which is exactly how we get the inversion of the burden of proof. That is, you have to prove to me you didn't commit this crime before the accuser has to prove to me that you did. That's the wrong way around, any way you slice it. And if it were applied to literally any other crime, we would be able to see that as clear as day. Like, prove to me you didn't murder X person. Well, or prove to me you didn't steal this person's car, and then secretly return it in the night so you didn't get caught. Um, how exactly would I do that unless there was like a traffic camera or something? And again, this is one of the reasons why in this context, it's useful to record everything, because if you find yourself in a situation where the burden of proof has been informally socially inverted, you need the evidence to prove you weren't wherever the person said you were, or you weren't doing the thing they were saying you were doing. Because unfortunately, even though we live in a civilization that de facto on paper has the notion the person being accused has legitimacy until proven otherwise, and the person doing the accusing is, only theoretical until proven otherwise. Socially, in severe cases like this, in the case of very severe crimes that really get our instincts going, our threat narrative spinning, it's very often the inverse. And it's what leads to things like vigilante justice and mob violence. Because especially if you grow up in a academic context where the police are viewed as fascist enforcers of the status quo, not um, legitimizers of justice. You might then proceed to think to yourself, well, if I can't trust the police, but I know morally, emotionally, and intuitively that this person did this, then how are we going to get justice for it? I know. We'll take 100 of our closest friends and go and exact justice as we define it. Because clearly, if you want this done right, you have to do it yourself. So let's
You
all
know,
get, pitchforks and torches and then go lynch somebody.
you mentioned the police just now, and personally, you know, we have to deal with these kangaroo courts on campus where they have a lesser burden of proof than the police actually have.
Yeah,
So if you are on campus and somebody accuses you of this, I would go to the police myself and get them involved.
yeah,
And then
but
if you didn't do
that's why
anything,
I
the police
mentioned
find you innocent.
the thing about the current the academically approved worldview is the police are um, authoritarian jackboots for the established order, not agents of justice.
Only in Australia.
Well, let's that's someday we should do one on how the virus in particular has exacerbated some um, current issues, but
Then we'll really get
that's a
banned.
test for another day.
We will really get banned for that.
Yeah. Please, please do not accuse us of being anti-vaxxers. They're just we're skeptical of one. That doesn't mean we're skeptical of the fact that they work or that the process works. Anyway, moving on.
Do you have anything more to say about this particular topic?
Just like I said, in these sorts of cases, we're seeing an inversion of the burden of proof, and that is really worrying, especially when you consider kind of the instinctual predispositions that human beings have to always prioritize the vulnerabilities, the personal perspectives, and the protection of women, and the idea of utilizing men or demonizing men being the default. It's just quite horrifying.
The last thing I want to say is that men, record every communication, save your messages, your text, your emails, what have you, because even if you're in a woman that is you're in a great relationship with her and you really care about her, relationships can turn sour. Just ask Mr. Depp.
Oh boy, that whole that whole thing. And again, definitely watch our episode on, I believe it was men and abuse, where we talked about um the Johnny Depp case. We
Yeah,
also talked about it a little bit in the, was it the divorce one? I want to say it was the divorce one.
possibly, yeah.
It was, I know it was fairly early on. It was either the divorce one or the one immediately following that we talked about the Johnny Depp case for a little bit too.
Well, it's a very poignant case, and it involves a lot of different issues.
And it also demonstrates that, unlike a lot of modern day social issues, this is not something that goes away when you go further up the class ladder. Because if it can take place between Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, how many pleb men, how many peasant men and women do you think it affects at any given time? Because money, this is one of the, this is how you know it's a legitimate social issue, because less legitimate social issues can be bullshit shitted their way out of by a means of authority and money. But in the case of a lot of modern day men's issues, authority and money can only get you so far. And if the moral zeitgeist gets the better of you, it doesn't matter how much authority or money you have, you are on the hook because we say so.
All right, let's end the stream there. It's been great talking to you, everybody.
Mm-hmm. Till next time, we've been the Duality of Men.
Take it easy.